Hello and most welcome to 1841 of the series. And we will continue with the reading of Hannah Strømmen's The Politics of the Beast, Rewiring Revelation 17. Last reading we went through different aspects of rewiring, so to speak. We mentioned, amongst other things, how the polarity is exaggerated between evil and good. They seem to be absolutely disjunct. And here's a good one. Through Derrida's deconstructed sovereignty, it might be possible to rethink the terms in which the political becomes caught up in a reasoning that rests on the violent exclusion of the other. Yeah, it's the violent exclusion. It's the two sharp concepts. And it's the modern idea, the modern invention of goodness as having no contact with its other, being cut off completely. And thereby, as Derrida has shown so many times, thereby undermining goodness itself. I think Heraclitus also went into that life and death is the same. Without the inclusion of death, there can be no life. And taken one step further, without death, there can be no permanence of life. I think that is pretty much where we are today. A left-sided take on reality, left hemisphere take, where it's either or, and we lose permanence. And we also ended up with a God who is all that is not God. So God is not physics, it's not matter, it's excluded from daily life. It is unconnected to the classical laws. You just look upon them. That severity of exclusion makes it even worse, I'd say. It becomes too excluded, too disjunct, too cut apart, lacking any reality whatsoever in the end. I also come to think about the Matryoshkas of Lucio Diego Rappaport. The Matryoshkas that can be separate and within each other because of the quality of inclusiveness that they connects to each other. Inside and outside in them gets connected. They are not ulteriorly disconnected. They are interconnected, joined from the outside in, bringing both the outside to the inside and the inside to the outside. Thereby making inside and outside possible. The Klein bottle is a good example where you understand it's only when evil comes into the good, good can be disjunct or be good, be something. Otherwise, with the polarity, there is codependence, something that Derrida many times showed. If we say goodness is not evil and base goodness on evil, evil is the supplement or the supplement, and the supplement will in the end take over, be the ruling power. And that is the superficial ostensive definition, the childish way of looking at the world. And it will be invoking evil rather than dispelling it or actively encouraging goodness. We will be caught up in inviting evil. When I read that strophe, a couple of paragraphs by Strømmen, I came to think of the only way to have a vampire in the house is to invite him. So a vampire can only enter a house if you invite him. Can knock on the door, that's what he can do. But he cannot enter until you say, welcome or step in. Welcome to the warmth. By separating evil out, what we do is we invite it in a rather nasty fashion. If we define goodness based on evil, we are inviting evil. And that's the second rule from Wittgenstein, Francis Lynn. That is by explanation. We explain goodness. Goodness thereby doesn't have a property of its own. It is explainable by evil. Thereby evil is invited. We say, what is goodness? Explanation. It's not evil. Thereby the evil is invited. Who is me? Who is Hans? Well, it's not George or Anna. Then I would lack a personality. I would only define myself according to what I'm not or what others are. It's a considerable weakening of everything. And this is exactly how things are done in classical physics as well. Particle is defined by emptiness or perceived emptiness. Goodness becomes attenuated. But it's not, I'm afraid, that evil disappears, because this is exactly what evil is. Evil is the enter into the house. Evil is relativism of that kind. nothing can be itself, then we will not have the pure goodness of the Lamb. We will still have a lamb with a kernel or something horrid like that, like the poodle in Faust. Best case scenario, we just get unreality. The modern God is defined, it's not matter, it's not that, it's something other. Spiritual is not what is matter. Rule 1 and 2 participates in doing this. And I continue my read on page 58, and it seems to be in the PDF, page 13, for you who are following on the PDF. Ingrid Salid Gillhus explains one particular pertinent performance of Roman power involving animals, namely the hunting spectacles that took place in arenas. Often involving large numbers of animals being killed as a form of mass entertainment in antiquity. In Roman arenas, animals were both imported and indigenous, carnivorous and herbivorous, wild and domestic. They had to be captured, put in menageries, and then were kept in cages in the lower levels of the Colosseum and special areas outside the city. For the fights, animals were brought into arenas in Rome. Bulls was set against panthers, rhinoceros against bears, and lions against tigers, as well as all types of animal against humans. The beast of Revelation, who is leopard, bear, and lion, could be read as an amalgamation of such animals used for Roman spectacles, pointing quite literally to the beastly powers of Rome. Seen in this light, the beast is not merely the ferocious, many-headed, derogatory representation of violence, but the vulnerable, victimized, exploited bodies of the hunted, captive animals in a brutalizing arena. While these animals may be ferocious, their place in such a context is also that of creatures robbed of their habitat and freedom, forced into a mold or as threatening enemy. The fact that the lamb conquests the beast in a sense only emphasizes this precarious state. The whore is caught up in this logic of sovereign power over the animal other, closely affiliated with the beast. She too is deemed beastly. Her blood drinking denotes a predatory ferocity, as if an animal carcass, the she is to be burnt, or perhaps the burning is a form of cooking preparation before she is devoured, as if her body has become meat. In the York Minster Great East Window, the whore is depicted holding her cup with a frog climbing out of it, a snake curled around her shoulder. In the Hebrew Bible and New Testament, frogs are frequently symbols of evil, and this symbolism endured into the medieval era, where frogs were used to symbolize heresy, greed, evil, and sin. The frog and snake further animalize the whore, to the extent that she too might be seen as a woman-animal hybrid with many animal parts, akin to the beast she rides. In the destruction of her body, she is stripped of the marks of her personhood, her clothes and jewelry, and her flesh is made naked as if an animal. these materials, after all, proper to human. Like the beast, the woman becomes the living thing to be subjected, dominated, domesticated, mastered. The horse animal nature is inextricably caught up in a sexualized imagery. It is her status as a prostitute that lends her an ugliness that becomes perpetuated through the ages as an archetypal female evil. In Otto Dix's Der Krieg series from 1924, for instance, the whore is imagined as an unattractive prostitute in a French brothel run by the German army during the First World War. She stands for the repulsive, manipulating force of soldiers. Jennifer Glancy and Stephen Moore propose the readings of Revelation have been too bookish in their dealing with the whore of Babylon, thus making the way the whore is specifically a whore. Glancy and Moore focus on the way in which the whore is akin to a brothel or street prostitute rather than a courtesan. They argue that the references to porneia would have conjured up the first and foremost in the minds of the urban Christian addressed in Revelation a certain category of flesh and blood person, rather than a figure of high-class literature and art in the form of a courtesan. Because prostitution was not illegal or seen to be breaking moral laws, as it was not considered adultery. Prostitutes in the Roman Empire were generally left alone, unprotected. As Robert Knapp writes in his book Invisible Romans, prostitutes had very little protection, and the frequent conflation of prostitutes with slaves meant that these women were considered fair game when it came to social and physical abuse. While prostitution was a source of income, it was recognized by the law in being a taxable trade. It frequently fell upon the vulnerable. Sarah B. Pomeroy, for instance, notes that baby girls and daughters were sometimes sold into prostitution by their parents, and it can be assumed that dire poverty led many women into prostitution, into a status lower even than slaves, whose welfare was at least maintained according to their value in a household. It goes without saying that this was frequently a dangerous life, most often located at the bottom of the social order. In Revelation 17, the whore of Babylon, as a symbol of Rome, taps into this imagery of prostitution and is crucially reinforced by the animalization of the whore to exploit the most efficacious mode of conjuring up antipathy, the destruction of the whore is, as Tina Pippin comments, the ultimate misogynist fantasy. Employing prostitution associated with an animalized female to characterize evil here conjures up antipathy rather than compassion. just as the beasts of the Roman arena are used to evoke aversion, not pity. The way the goddess Roma, a queen, is frequently identified as a parody in being dressed up and paraded as a prostitute might point to the way the imagery is strategically employed, but does not offer pause in thinking about whether she could or ought to be seen otherwise. By disallowing this imagery to simply speak as if a smooth and glossy surface without the dark and gritty realities that inform them, I have tried to show that the logic of sympathy and antipathy breaks down, and the whore and beast might paradoxically invoke compassion. Rather than depicting the Roman Empire as a revolting sovereign power that must, in light of its abject evil, be conquered, a closer examination of the whore of Babylon, like the animals of the Roman arena, reveals the vulnerable and suffering victims of Roman society denigrated to a category of non-human and residing in a space of suffering. In this sense, the political logic of the land as the sympathetic sovereign power in view of its suffering innocence is overturned as it becomes a superlative sovereign power. And the whore and the beast become the powerless, suffering animals of the political order, at the mercy of the reason of the strongest. In order to establish that sovereignty is proper only exclusively to itself. If such a battle for sovereignty is fought on the grounds that one side is set up as a legitimate sovereignty, sympathetic and superior as a saving and suffering innocent figure in the form of a lamb. Such a logic of sympathy and antipathy collapses when the lamb becomes the figure of ultimate sovereignty, and the whore and beast are divulged as weak, suffering victims. Rather than promote a weak force, the Christian imagination here seemingly plays into a reason of the strongest in the contest for sovereignty. And this imaginary can be seen in many of the later depictions of the lamb and its enemies. But it could also be argued that the biblical text subtly subverts such clear-cut oppositions at the same time as it proffers them. As the superlative sovereignty shifts onto the lamb, does the sympathy shift to the whore and beast? Or as the whore and beast are unpackaged as victims of Roman society, does the whole dichotomy between good and evil become muddied and confused? Where ought sympathy to lie? Revealed as the animals they are, the beast and the whore in this reading become in a sense what Derrida describes as a deconstructed sovereignty, that is embodying a sovereignty that is shared, mortal, vulnerable rather than indivisible. Such a revelation is a recognition of the suffering and mortality of animals and humans alike in a complex networks of power, of the divisibility and diffuseness of the limits and the lines that separate the human from the animal, or sovereign from non-sovereign. If these images are pathetic, if they evoke sympathy, it is also because they pathetically open the immense question of pathos and the pathological, precisely that is, of suffering, pity and compassion. To the sharing of this suffering among the living, to the law, ethics and politics that must be brought to bear upon this experience of compassion. It is for him a matter of awakening to our responsibilities and our obligations vis-à-vis the living in general, and to a fundamental compassion. Peggy Carmuth insists that wakefulness for Derrida is the very condition or possibility of critical reception and inheritance. Such a wakefulness might prompt us to think about how such a critical reception impinges also on our practices in the present. A political biblical fable. I think that's the conclusion. I think I should end before that one, so we know exactly where we start. So we avoid the two common words sovereignty here. All too common. It's a long time I had so much material on any text as I do now. It is quite thought-provoking. If we go, please, to page 159, if you may. we read just about the Colosseum, and I think the Colosseum is a good trope, or rather a simile. The world itself is like the Colosseum. They had vermitorious, I think they were called, entrances to the lower levels of the Colosseum, where animals and also people, when it needed to be evacuated or when they needed to leave the Colosseum. I think it was called vomitaria. Escape, getting out of. Inside, it's filled in the cellar region, on the underside, fighting ferocious animals. They are actually brought up with an incredibly complex system to the stage where they can be gazed upon. This is a very good trope for how life is working. For the enjoyment of the Colosseum to be possible, the inside must be coming from the evil outside, so to speak. It cannot be snapped off, castrated, or, as I will call it later here in this summary, chlorinized, sanitized, or radiated. Things, I think. The beasts of Revelation, the six-lined, the beast of Revelation, who is leopard, bear, and lion, could be read as an amalgamation of such animals used for Roman spectacles, pointing quite literally to the beastly powers of Rome. Well, animals are always amalgamation. Even in a fish, you can find 50% or 15% cow genes. We are amalgamations. This is what makes us unique. Going further down to the second paragraph on the same page, 159. The whore too is caught up in this logic of sovereign power over the animal other, closely affiliated with the beast. She too is deemed beastly. Her blood drinking denotes a predatory ferocity, as if an animal carcass. She is to be burnt, or perhaps the burning is a form of cooking preparation before she is devoured, as if her body has become meat. And going down on a few sentences, there is a mentioning of frogs. Frogs are frequently used symbols of evil. This symbolism endured into the medieval era, where frogs were used to symbolize heresy, greed, evil, and sin. Frogs can also be kissed and become a prince. So maybe the inside is good and the outside evil. We still have this reality to it, a mixture of two or more. And later down we find, later on the same page, 159, the fifth or sixth line from the bottom. In the destruction of her body, she stripped of the marks of her personhood, her clothes and jewelry, and her flesh is made naked as if an animal. She stripped of all personality. This stripping is the same as excluding everything to have this ostensive definition, one property only. This is the same as bringing out all the ornaments from a church to make it more pure, to castrate it, to domesticate it, to dominate it, to emasculate. This is done to God today. He is not supposed to have any evil within him. He is depersonalized. Even the Archbishop of Sweden, probably Norway, Denmark as well, says it's the same God in all cultures, making him left hemisphere universalized thing without the properties of any significant contraries, polarities, or evil, or personality traits. All those things that are absolutely necessary for God to be. If we go to page 160, if we may, Kalle, the second line from the bottom, the next page, go to the very bottom, please. In Revelation 17, the whore of Babylon as a symbol of Rome taps into this imagery of prostitution and is crucially reinforced by the animalization of the whore to exploit the most efficacious mode of conjuring antipathy. The destruction of the whore is, as Tina Pippen comments, the ultimate misogynist fantasy. Or is it the birth of goodness? Evil is an ostensive definition according to the ones possessed in the left hemisphere. And the best we can do it is to rid us of it on the surface, and thereby ridding us of everything that makes anything real. In quantum mechanics, two opposing things, mostly mentioned as particle and wave, is what makes up the world. These are the two most antagonistic things that ever existed. All that is particle is excluded by wave, and vice versa. Still, they make up the world. They are much more contrary than water and air, than stone or sky or moon or sun, and most definitely more contrary than life and death. Definitely. These contradictions is what makes reality. Expelling it makes less reality. Taking away it, chlorinizing it, emasculating it, ridiculing it, will you say. Burning off everything. You can use fire, as was indicated before, to burn off all details, to make something pure. Purification by fire, autodafé. The same is done here. And we even, as an example, change the hymns because they need to be more pure according to the private language person. Changing Paternoster in Swedish to something that fits a more pure description of the left hemisphere. No, reality is always inclusive, not exclusive. Yin and yang we mentioned earlier. I think that's a good depiction of how it works. Yin and yang was on the weapon shield of the founder of modern physics, Niels Bohr. That is not a coincidence. The idea of expelling things, of emasculating, driving them out, making it one-sided, just pure white, or just pure black for that matter, that's the problematic role. When something is allowed to be included, to come into, this is when we get goodness, not by expelling it. The Roman Colosseum, as I mentioned, is, with its gut system of beastly animals, is a good picture of goodness, used for understanding even higher things. The New Jerusalem. Without those things, we couldn't go any further. And we also know today that the mind, the spirit, has disappeared. To be a soul, to have awareness or expanded consciousness, we need to, in our thinking, include many things. The left hemisphere is incapable of that, speaking in McGill Christian terms. But I can bring it to an everyday level. Go to the Mediterranean and you see bus drivers both drinking coffee, chatting, being on the radio, speaking over the telephone, enjoying a cigarette, and eating a snack. That expansion of consciousness can expand forever and ever by bringing in what is contrary. Could you say that listening to radio and driving a bus is focus as we see it today? No. But for the right hemisphere, that is exactly what focus is. And by narrowing our minds, our eye to the world, by not including, we become as narrow as suggested here, as implied here, expelling things that makes up goodness, looking for some sort of private language, Platonic purity, and thereby evicting all goodness, all holiness, all higher forms of reality, not having anything of abstract thinking. That disappears first. That, I think, if I'm citing him, Rappaport, if there is no inclusion of lower thinking into our minds, there neither is any higher. A lesson from the Klein bottle or the yin and yang symbol. We go to page 162. The fifth line here. Once more we have the word, what's the fourth line, sorry. As the superlative sovereignty shifts onto the lamb, does the symphony shift to the whore and the beast? Or as the whore and the beast is unpackaged as victims of Roman society, does the whole dichotomy between good and evil become muddled and confused? Where ought sympathy to lie? It doesn't become muddled and confused, it becomes clearer. Read fractal theory, for God's sake. Listen to Terry Marks Tarlov. listen to mathematics, listen to physics. It becomes clearer by entering the liminal space between the coast, that is the water, and the land. Everything that is there in that liminal zone, in the border zone. Nothing. If you take just one, you have nothing, zero information. If you take both and what's in between, you got it all. You got both sides and the inside. You lose nothing. You gain an enormity. The whore and the beast and the lamb are interparticipatory. They are interwoven, and they do not lose a shift or an inkling of their individuality or their traits. On the contrary, this is what makes them so strong. Kalle Lundahl, come in and comment.
Let us go to page 14 in the PDF. PDF 14. So so it's page 159. What I do like in this paper by Strømmen is this phrase, the beast of Revelation, whose leopard, bear, a lion, could be read as an amalgamation of such animals used for Roman spectacles, pointing quite literally to the beastly boys of Rome. So here you could, of course, explain the beasts in the book of Revelation as the beasts that the Roman Empire literally used in the Roman arena. I think this is a good explanation. One way of explaining the beasts. Absolutely, I agree with this. And I was thinking about a bishop who lived in the 2nd century AD, that is only a few decades after the book of Revelation was finished, Ignatius of Antioch. And the Romans took him from Antioch, and they took him to Rome, where he would fight in Colosseum against the lions. In one of the letters, Ignatius of Antioch says that he looks toward being devoured by lions, because he will become Eucharist, so to say. He will become, so to say, communion meat, both literally and metaphorically. So Ignatius asked his fellow Christians that they should not try to implore mercy from the Roman government, but he wanted to go to this sacrifice, so to say, in the Roman arena. So this is, in this case, it was we had literal beasts, lions, who devoured Ignatius of Antioch only a few decades after the book of Revelation. And it could be an interesting study of how much did the Romans use leopards by bears. And I think it's a good picture of the so a lion in the book of Revelation is this beast has a lion's mouth, and it was actually a lion's mouth that would have devoured this Ignatius of Antioch that he foresaw in his letter to Christians. So indeed, this is a good phrase and correct, I think. And also, let me go to next page PDF 15 and 60. This last phrase, last lines. In Revelation 17, the whore of Babylon as a symbol of Rome taps into this image of prostitution, and I've already spoken about this. So let's imagine that whore of Babylon is Rome, and she would be a prostitute, but then she needs a master who's more powerful. So would Rome be doing prostitution with himself or with herself?
No.
It's possible if perhaps she has, I don't know. It's okay. Of course, you can insult somebody, say you are whore, and it doesn't have to be necessarily true. It depends how you define the thing. But as I have argued in the past, that whore of Babylon is also a symbol of Jerusalem, and
Yeah.
that would be fitting that her master Rome forces her to prostitute herself in different ways. So also here is we have speaking of complementarity. This is also a similar thing in quantum physics,
Oh
as well as
yeah.
in Goto
Yeah.
Arns of this Bohr. So complementarity is four Babylons, both Jerusalem and Rome. And we could go to a last thing. You mentioned this already, but I think it's good to repeat this 162. So this is indeed a little bit strange, this reasoning here about sympathy. We have sympathy with the evil. Of course, you could have sympathy with, let's say, sin. Let's say sympathy, you like sin, of course.
Yeah.
You can enjoy it in one way. So is evil and good muddied and confused? Muddied and confused. As you said, Hans, you compared with the Norwegian coast.
Yeah.
So let's say in this case, let's say you are Norwegian, and the sea would be, so to say, the evil thing in a way. It is the enemy, so to say, unbridled nature, and yes, the good thing here is the land itself, where you have your power, you have your,
Yeah.
but you also need the sea, of course,
Mm.
because it gives you possibility for importing things, traveling and so forth. So you
Indeed.
need
Yeah.
also the evil, so to say, in this case, the sea. But they are still not muddied and confused. You know that if you're Norwegian, you probably you prefer the sea. Excuse me, the country.
Yeah. Yeah.
Although the comparison is not completely accurate, but I think sea is dangerous. The Vikings were brave, but they still knew that the sea was it was a evil game. So to say, go and rape and steal items from foreign nations.
Precisely. And what makes the sea its fractality towards the land. I think the old idea, I don't, it's very hard to describe, but I think the old idea was that there was some sort of matter to the land, like, I don't know, atoms in the coastline or grains of sand, if you like,
Mm,
building up land.
mm,
And also the water, which is harder to imagine, that the water was built up of water molecules or something like that.
mm,
Reminds me actually that thinking of stone logic,
mm,
that you pile things on top of each other to get a property, to get something, to be something.
mm.
That fractality shows no, the land is never the land by itself. It's land because of what surrounds it. That is where it comes from the air, from the water, from what's underneath. Therein lies the properties.
But okay, so in the beginning of this lecture, Hans, you said that good should be explained by goodness. If you define goodness using evil, you invite evil. But if you compare this metaphor of yours to the Norwegian coastline, it's not completely true. Because in order to define Norway, you need also to define the sea. Are you not also inviting the sea?
Yeah,
Are you not?
the sea is invited, and it's invited in its how do you say, borderline of the sea makes up the land.
But didn't you say, Hans, that you must be able to explain good only by goodness? But
No,
if
no, no.
okay, you meant the
It's
other way
the
around.
defining line. If you want to have goodness, you need to bring out, if you want to have it, it's better with the Norwegian coastline, of
Mm,
course. But if you want to have the Norwegian coastline, as you so aptly said, you need to bring in the evil of the sea or the air
mm.
which
Okay,
surrounds
then I understand. Okay, then
it.
I'm on board.
The
Absolutely.
classical idea is that you can have the property only, and you can sort of cast away all impurities on the surface or superficially. That's the ostensive, actually, a combination
Mm,
of the ostensive and rule number two as explanation. I explain the material of the Norwegian coastline in the matter of atoms or something like that.
mm. I think I propose that we end this lecture with this Ignatius.
Hmm.
Okay, he died about 140 AD or earlier, and he was taken to Rome to be devoured by beasts. Let me see if it's lion. Ah, yeah, okay. His attributes surrounded by lions or in chains.
Hmm.
So you see it actually here. Let's see. This is of course a modern presentation, relatively modern. You see it here. Huh. This is a lion. This could be a leopard. Do you think this is a leopard? As I'm not so
That
confident
is
on
a
that.
leopard, yeah, I'd say that's a leopard.
Let me see who made this painting. This is a
Not
Rome.
the
Gallery
best
Borghese.
depiction of a leopard, but it can be nothing but a leopard. If you,
Braganzano. This is. Oi, oi, oi.
I'm
This is a
not criticizing the artist. It's probably the lack of, uh,
knowledge of leopards.
yeah, yeah, not having any leopards around.
Mm.
Odd coincidence here. Last week I was sitting in the same room as I'm sitting now
Mm.
with a girl called Melissa, and she's actually from Antioch.
Oi.
And she was wearing a waistcoat that was leopard. How do you say? Leopard patterned. Leopard
Mm.
tigermönster. No, vad heter det? Leopardmönstrat. Leopard pattern.
You should
Leotard.
ask her
It's called
about Ignaz
leotard.
Antioch.
Leotard. Weird coincidence. She was also Christian. Maybe she's been devoured. I don't know. It's an
Absolutely.
absolutely beautiful painting, Kalle. Thank you for
Mm.
that. It's something to lay your eyes on. I say thank you to the listeners and viewers. Have a very excellent morning, day, afternoon, or wherever you are. And bye bye for now.
Also.